So we have some interesting news about former Impact World Champion Tessa Blanchard. Yes, we are back to getting stories about Tessa Blanchard, about where she could or could not end up next in pro wrestling. And of course, Tessa Blanchard, what a crazy year she has had. She was the first ever world champion in professional wrestling history in a major North American promotion. She won the Impact World Championship back in January at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view, but then by July, prior to Slammiversary, she was out of the doors of Impact Wrestling as she was released by the company with her contract terminated prior to it expiring. But now, for Impact World Champion Tessa Blanchard, she is now reportedly subject to the interest of both WWE and AEW. Now, this is according to a report by Wrestling Inc., who has reported that both organizations are keen to secure her signature when she's able to get in and out of Mexico alongside her husband and fellow former Impact Wrestling star Daga. The pair are currently residing there at present due to the ongoing global health crisis, amongst rumours that neither major promotion were keen to sign her. This is the crazy and interesting thing about this whole Tessa Blanchard situation, amongst the other accusations and allegations regarding Tessa Blanchard in the past, is that we're getting a bunch of reports saying neither company's interested in her, it's too hot a property to touch, they're worried about the PR, they don't want to bring her in, she might upset the locker room, there is a lot of baggage there, obviously. Then you're getting reports saying just WWE's interested, then you're getting reports saying AEW isn't interested. Now we're getting this report by Wrestling Inc. that's saying that both companies are interested in signing her. Now, the report by Wrestling Inc. notes that the controversial circumstances surrounding her Impact Wrestling departure, as well as the story that broke regarding a racial slur that's potentially been used by her years prior, haven't actually put either organisation off signing Tessa Blanchard. Though it can't be understated right now how significant those blots on her copybook are when it comes to Tessa Blanchard and her past. What's crazy is that in the past, it hasn't stopped major companies making signings. Controversy sometimes creates cash, to use a phrase from Eric Bischoff, but both companies are kind of looking, or apparently, according to this report by Wrestling Inc., willing to look past the issues when it comes to Tessa Blanchard if there is money on the table to be made when it comes to the former Impact World Champion. Now, what's crazy about this is that AEW has previously been reported that they're not interested. Now WWE was reported to not be interested. Now they're both apparently interested. Now, this is what's fascinating about this, because by all accounts, the reason that Tessa Blanchard hasn't been active or signed with any pro wrestling company since leaving Impact in the summer is that she's still celebrating her marriage that occurred earlier this year to Daga. Once they move back to the United States, or once they are able to travel from Mexico freely, then by all accounts, this whole issue when it comes to signing with a company will open up and she'll finally sign somewhere. Of course, Tessa Blanchard's only wrestled one match this year, and that was against Kylie Ray at Warrior Wrestling only a couple of months ago. But what's fascinating about this, so we're getting this report by Wrestling Inc. saying both companies are interested, WWE's interested, AEW's interested, they're both interested in Tessa Blanchard. WWE's got one of the strongest female divisions in the world in NXT and on the main roster. Think of the matches Tessa Blanchard could have with Bayley, Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, etc., Asuka. Then you've got the AEW Women's Division, which there's been a lot of criticism about from yours truly as well. I think there's a massive issue when it comes to the booking of female talent in AEW. So both companies, for different reasons, could use to have someone with the quality of Tessa Blanchard in their company. So we're getting that report from Wrestling Inc. saying that both companies are interested. We're then getting a report by Dave Meltzer saying completely the opposite, especially when it comes to AEW. This is what's fascinating about this. It would appear, according to Dave Meltzer from the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, that AEW has decided, quote, to not pursue Tessa Blanchard. Meltzer noted that as things stands right now, AEW, quote, is not going to be her destination, even though nobody, quote, will deny her talent and the value she would bring to the company. Now, with AEW Women's Division often criticised for lacking star power, many fans have said that AEW could use someone with the star power of Tessa Blanchard in the AEW Women's Division. She would arguably be the biggest female star immediately upon signing that AEW have on the roster. Now, Dave Meltzer didn't mention any specific reason as to why AEW won't be pursuing Tessa Blanchard, according to Meltzer, but the former Impact Wrestling World Champion, of course, as I mentioned, was called out by several women's wrestlers in January prior to her winning the World Championship in Impact for her backstage behaviour over the years. Most notably, Tessa Blanchard was accused of using a racial slur while referring to La Rosa Negra in 2017 during a tour of Japan. Now, as I mentioned, Blanchard's only wrestling match at the start of this pandemic was a loss to Kylie Ray at Warrior Wrestling recently, but it was reported back in June that WWE and Tessa Blanchard Blanchard have been in contact following her release from Impact. So when it comes to this, there is a lot to get into. There is very murky territory, really, isn't it? Somebody's going to be right and someone's going to be wrong. I know that's an obvious statement, but we're getting so much contrasting information there with AEW isn't interested from Meltzer and Wrestling saying, no, both companies are interested, and another report saying WWE's already been in contact with Tessa Blanchard. So there has been a multitude of different things reported when it comes to Tessa Blanchard. I get asked this a lot. Is this true? Is this not true? Why do you talk about things that aren't confirmed? Why are we talking about things that have been reported? Blah, blah, blah. This is what this channel is meant to be, and this community is here at WrestleNews 365. It's about discussion. It's about discussion. It's about opinion. It's about providing a platform for the community of subscribers that we have to talk, to share opinions, and try and figure out what's going on in the world of pro wrestling. And there's always so much to talk about and so much to break down in the world of pro wrestling that what I try and do on this channel is try and give everyone a platform to talk about it in the description box, in the community tabs, all that fun stuff, and just try and open up and have a conversation about pro wrestling, and most importantly, welcome everyone's opinion. There are so many channels and so many websites and so many people on social media that if you have an opinion on something, that immediately, if it's not an opinion that they agree with, it's wrong. There is no such opinion in pro wrestling that's wrong. There are facts that are right and wrong. When it comes to opinion and taste, everyone's different. That's what I always think with pro wrestling. Everyone's different. You'll never see me in a comment section if anyone responds to these videos saying your opinion is wrong or I hate it or this kind of stuff. It might be I disagree, but you're absolutely welcome to your opinion. Everyone's welcome here on the channel. So this is why we have videos like this, to see all these different reports, try and figure out really what's going on, and try and figure out what's right, what's wrong, and where in between, where the truth might actually lie. Now, Tessa Blanchard, obviously, there is no doubt in my mind, she's obviously incredibly talented. She's still incredibly young, and still incredibly young into her career, and she's achieved a hell of a lot. During her run with Impact, as I mentioned, Impact World Champion, Knockouts Champion, she really has done it all, and she is an incredibly talented pro wrestler, female or not. She's just incredibly talented, and there's no doubt about that. She is arguably one of the best female performers in the world. The issue always when it comes to Tessa Blanchard, and this will be the case going forward, I guess, throughout her career, because the allegations that were made against her were incredibly heavy and serious, there is so much baggage there. There is so much baggage there. And you do have to question, does WWE need Tessa Blanchard on the roster? No, they don't need Tessa Blanchard on the roster. They have a variety of female talents on their roster. They have one of the best female divisions in the world. Yes, they're hurting right now because you've got the likes of Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Ronda Rousey all on the shelf. Nevertheless, they have one of the best female divisions in the world in NXT and on the main roster. Does AEW need her? And this might surprise you. Honestly, I would say no. Because this has been always my opinion when it comes to the AEW women's division and the female wrestling in AEW. The issue in AEW with their women's division, the reason for me why it's really criticised and why it is bad, the issue there isn't talent. They do have some names on that roster that maybe do need improvement. And if they had someone like Tessa Blanchard come in, would she be the best wrestler on the roster when it comes to the women? Probably. Probably immediately. I mean, you could argue Thunder Rosa, etc., Hikaru Shida. The issue with AEW when it comes to the women's division isn't talent. It's the booking philosophy of women's wrestling in AEW. That is the biggest problem when it comes to AEW. It's not the talent. They've got talent there. If they were booked properly and they had a good booking philosophy on women's pro wrestling, AEW wouldn't have a problem there. The issue is they don't care for women's wrestling in AEW. They just don't. It's an afterthought. It's secondary to them. It's a novelty. And that might sound harsh, but just look at the evidence. The evidence is there when it comes to AEW and their booking of females in their company. They have one women's match per show on Dynamite, usually lasts about 5 minutes. Most of the time it's sandwiched between two segments, probably the segment before the main event. It lasts about 5 minutes. You can tell the commentators, even when they're discussing it, they're not really into it. Why? Because they're already talking about what's happening in the segment prior or the main event, or they treat it as a novelty. So it lasts 5 minutes. How can you tell a story there? How can you progress a storyline during that? You can't. There's only one storyline most of the time that's ongoing in AEW at any period of time. That's the main storyline. That's all they care about. And again, it's an afterthought. It's an afterthought. And when is the last time you see a Dynamite with multiple women's matches? You don't. You rarely do. You rarely do. When is the last time you see pay-per-views with multiple women's matches? Now, people will argue, what about Full Gear? One was in the pre-show. Why does it have to be in the pre-show? Allysin Kay versus Serena Deeb, fantastic match for the NWA World Women's Championship. Why did that need to be on the pre-show? It didn't. There's matches on that Full Gear card that could have easily replaced that match on the pre-show, and you should have had a championship match on the main pay-per-view. They didn't. Why? Because they don't care. You look at a promotion like Impact Wrestling, the Knockouts division, female wrestling is the cornerstone of that company. It's one of the most popular aspects of their program. They have multiple women's matches, multiple women's storylines. They have multiple women's championships as well, with the tag team championships coming back. And you have the Knockouts regularly main eventing TVs. They might even main event. I think they've main evented pay-per-views as well. When are you going to get that in AEW? You're not. You're just not. When in WWE, they have the females main event in pay-per-views, they have the females main event in WrestleMania, they have the females main event in TV shows. Why? Because they believe in it. They invest time. It's not just about money and talent. It's about investing time and opportunity into the women's division. And AEW just doesn't do that. So even if AEW signed Tessa Blanchard, would that change that? Would it change their booking philosophy? I don't know if it would. And I've mentioned this before. This was the most damning thing, I think, when it comes to AEW's philosophy on booking female wrestling, was Cody Rhodes' comments on that pre-show for the Full Gear, that media call that he was on. He was asked by a person on the call. They were a bit angry, or they were just confused when it came to the Women's Championship match at Full Gear between Hikaru Shida and Nyla Rose. They said, you know what? We haven't seen much of a story. There's been no real storyline and not a lot of segments hyping this up on Dynamite every single week. What's going on? And Cody Rhodes' response was the biggest BS response ever. He said, well, not every match at a pay-per-view needs to have a storyline behind it. We've been conditioned to think that this invisible camera sits in catering and then you see someone fight over a piece of cake or whatever he said. It was the biggest BS response out there. It just was. Because it's not true. It's not true. If that was the case, that, there doesn't need to be an issue for a match, how come his matches have storylines all the time? How come his matches always have issues and stories and gimmicks and all this kind of stuff? Why? Because that's how pro wrestling works. That's how pro wrestling works. That's how you build to matches. That's how you build pay-per-views. That's how you build everything. That is pro wrestling 101. How else, as a fan, are you meant to get invested in the match, in the storyline, or just not even the storyline, because there isn't one? How are you supposed to get invested in the match and sell pay-per-view buys and sell tickets when there's no story to get invested into? It just doesn't work like that. So that shows the perception of women's wrestling in AEW when it comes to the EVPs. That just goes to show it. Now, if Tessa Blanchard comes into AEW, does that change that? The only thing she could change, potentially, if she came in was, well, we're paying her a lot of money, she's maybe the best female wrestler on the roster, maybe she should be featured. That is the only thing it would change. It wouldn't change because it's be like, we need to take women's wrestling seriously, because they don't. They just don't. Cold, hard facts. And it's something that some people don't like to talk about when it comes to AEW. People like to criticize the women's division, but they don't like to really dig into why it's bad. It's got nothing to do with the talent. Everyone on that women's roster is incredibly talented. And I'm sure if they were given the opportunity, they would thrive. They're just not given it. They're just not given it. Look at a promotion like Impact Wrestling. When they're given the opportunity, they succeed time and time again. So that's the issue in AEW. It's got nothing to do with that. Would Tessa Blanchard change that? Only if she's paid a ton of money and they go, well, we've got to make some return on our investment here. That would be the only thing. And I know people say, well, Tully Blanchard works in AEW, of course, and he does. He's an on-screen manager for the likes of Shawn Spears and FTR. But realistically, he's got no influence on the situation. Just because Tully Blanchard works there doesn't mean they're going to sign his daughter, who is incredibly controversial. So that's got really nothing to do with it. I think from an AEW perspective, this is why I don't think Tessa Blanchard will sign for AEW. This is why I kind of question the report that both companies are interested in her, is that Tony Khan's been a vocal advocate for never allowing Hulk Hogan to an AEW event, even backstage. He had that comment on social media saying, you're banned from an AEW event, you're never allowed to come, because of his past allegations and evidence of using racial slurs. He said that it was unacceptable, and even though he apologized, he was never going to be allowed to an AEW event, and he was banned. Now, is Hulk Hogan ever going to attend an AEW event? No. But the point being that Tony Khan has set a standard. He's set a precedent there for himself. And allegations about Tessa Blanchard are similar. Now, is there evidence like Hulk Hogan's? No, there was tapes and that. Is there tapes of Tessa Blanchard? As far as I'm aware, there isn't. But there is a lot of first-hand witnessed evidence when it comes to Tessa Blanchard. So those allegations are very similar. And Tony Khan, again, he set a precedent for himself. How would you sign someone like Tessa Blanchard when you've set a standard when it comes to people like Hulk Hogan? That's an issue, and there will be people in the women's dressing room in both companies that don't like her because of these issues, and that'll be the problem in AEW, and that'll be the problem in WWE as well. And I know people will say, well, the issue with her signing with WWE, and maybe this is the reason why she hasn't signed with WWE as of yet. I believe the reason she hasn't signed with WWE yet is because of the travel issue. I think realistically that is the issue. Some people have said it's because WWE is a publicly traded company. They don't want to have bad PR. They want to stay away from bad PR. Bad PR hurts the stock price. And to be honest, look at the history, even the most recent history of WWE. That argument that WWE is scared of bad PR or doesn't want bad PR is so redundant. It is so redundant. If WWE thinks they can make money, they'll do it, regardless of the PR. I mentioned Hulk Hogan before. They brought him back after that craziness. They brought him back. And if you heard the transcript of his apology, allegedly that he made backstage when he came back to WWE, when he came back, and it was backstage at a pay-per-view. It might have been Extreme Rules in 2018. It was some pay-per-view he came back and he did basically an apology to everyone. And if you read the transcript of it, it was more of a case of, I'm sorry I got caught using that language, as opposed to, I'm sorry that I used it. And a lot of people didn't accept his apology. I think Titus O'Neil didn't accept his apology. I think members of the New Day didn't accept his apology. Why? Because it felt like it wasn't a case of, I'm really sorry, it was a mistake, I've grown, I've learned, I'm sorry, I regret it, it's not in my character. It was a case of, I'm sorry that someone was listening to me use that language. It's not much of an apology. It's not any admission of guilt there. And WWE brought him back regardless. And if you really want to dig into WWE caring about bad PR, they also have the deal with the Saudi Arabia deal. And look at the variety of issues that's raised. You've got talent being held hostage because of Vince McMahon cutting off the feed and allegedly not getting paid for the rights to the pay-per-views. You've got the women's rights issues when it comes with that deal. You've got Sami Zayn not being able to perform at these Saudi shows because he's got Syrian descent. You've got Aleister Black not being able to perform because he has a tattoo that is offensive apparently over there. Most of the females can't perform over there unless they're covered up from head to toe. You've got Darren Young, when he was under contract with WWE, couldn't perform at those Saudi shows because he was gay. And the response to that from WWE is, well, they're giving us millions. They're giving us a lot of money. So there you go. That shows how much WWE cares about PR there. Plus, on top of that, in 2020 alone, they've released a ton of talent during a worldwide pandemic, right before an earnings call to tell their investors they were turning a profit and had good revenue. They didn't have testing at the Performance Center for ages during the pandemic, and you had numerous outbreaks. You had people refusing to compete, like Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn said, I'm not going to that place, it's too dangerous, I'm staying at home. They were deemed an essential business by giving money to a re-election fund of the president and the governor of Florida. They took all of their main roster talent off of Twitch and Cameo and third-party platforms because they were making extra money during a pandemic when the talent's income was reduced due to no live events being run and those bonuses being taken away. WWE decided, we should have that money. They then threatened these talents with fines, suspensions, and even fired Zelina Vega because of this third-party edict and said, we'll take your money from Twitch if you do stream, that will be against your contracted payments. They don't care. They don't care about bad PR. So Tessa Blanchard is just a drop in the ocean when it comes to WWE. It really is. So if I had to weigh up where do I think Tessa Blanchard's going to go, I think she's going to sign with WWE. I really do. Even if the locker room has an issue with it, and even if there are female members of the locker room, male members of the locker room, if there are anyone that has an issue with it, WWE will do what they always do and say, tough luck. If you got a problem, you can leave. Unless it's someone ridiculously high up, and I don't even know if they'll be concerned with that issue. There's other things that they'll probably be concerned about. They should be concerned with that issue because it's a big issue, but WWE doesn't care about unhappy talents. They really don't care about bad PR. If you don't like it, leave. That's what they'll say. And then if they do want to leave, those talents, regardless of how big they are, they'll tell them to sit at home and they'll pay them. They'll then probably offer them a contract while they're sitting at home, like they did to Luke Harper, Matt Hardy, and others. Or they'll just fire them, like they did to Zelina Vega. So in the grand scheme of things, I expect Tessa Blanchard to sign with WWE. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Tessa Blanchard? Where do you think she'll sign up? Where do you think she'll end up next? Do you think it'll be WWE or AEW? Or somewhere else? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about AEW, WWE, NXT, Impact Wrestling, all that fun stuff here on the channel. So be sure to leave a comment below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.